Lovely to see all of you. Some people have travelled miles and how many people have driven or been in the car longer than an hour to get here? Like that? Like seriously? That's just very, very impressive, I think. So, you're welcome. Everybody's welcome. First of all, before I forget, because I am forgetful, there's two prayers of the people left now. Okay. So during this first song, we need two more of them to disappear, or Steve will manually plant one on you. But take those. It's just a real privilege to read, and you read it once, and then we all say it back to you. So that's a real privilege to do that. There's also the meditation group on. The meditation and Phil, keep me right. Doesn't the meditation and prayer group meet together on Tuesday night? Monday at 7. I thought it said Tuesday. Oh, is the book club a different thing, Steve? Oh, sorry. Monday night's a meditation. So Tuesday night is the book club. I was meant to bring my phone. I'm out without my phone. That's how forgetful. And I was meant to read a whole blurb. So this Tuesday night, they are going to pick new books and stuff. So it would, if you're that sort of a person, be there and help in the choices. You remember Brian, American Brian? I have names for everybody. Like Dr. David and y'all. Yeah, y'all. Hello, y'all. He used to say all of you is welcome, and all of you is welcome. So every part of you is welcome today. Out of my simplest bit, you're grumpy, sad, tired, excited, hyper, whatever you have brought into the room today, it's really all right. Just sit with yourself there and sit with us because we love you and accept you. It's just one of those type of meetings and gatherings where you're loved and accepted because we know we are loved and accepted by God. And this is not what you are. Came across this wee poem this week. You're not your age, not the size of the clothes you wear. You're not your weight or the colour of your hair. You're not your name or the dimples on your cheeks. You're all the books you read and all the words you speak. You are your croaky morning voice and the smiles you try to hide. You're the sweetness in your laughter and every tear you've cried. You're the songs you sing so loudly when you know you're all alone. You're the places that you've been to and the one that you call home. You're the things that you believe in and the people that you love. You're the photos in your bedroom and the future you dream of. You're made of so much beauty, but it seems that you forget when you decided that you were defined by all the things you're not. Thank God he does not define us by the things that we're not or the things that we are. He just totally loves and accepts us in a bigger way than we can do with each other. But here in this room and in this building, that's what we try to do. I came across this verse last night, and I have never read it before, but I adore it. But thanks be to God who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. How gorgeous is that? God uses you like a big bottle of perfume. I was going to bring my best perfume and spray it. He uses you like a big bottle of perfume as you mix and walk and be with people. You know, spraying, and you're carrying the smell of him. I love that. So that's what you are. That's what you need to be this week. And whatever you've brought this morning, all of you is welcome. But remember who you really are. And we're going to sing now. And you join. The guys.
Okay. Folks, we're going to stand together and we'll sing this first one, Leaning on the Everlasting Arm.
What a blessedness, what a peace. of the church is to proclaim in our living the story of God.
Oh, this actually sounds interesting. What is that? That sounds cool.
Yeah. Church to me is, well, I have a really broad definition of church. It doesn't take much for me to think that's church. I could point to so many things that other people don't say is church and say that it's church. So my ecclesiology is pretty broad, but I think the church is just basically two things: worship and practice. It's worship in that we come together and we proclaim things, partly to remind each other and partly to remind ourselves that we believe them. That's what liturgy's for, right? That's why we read scripture and we do the same kinds of things. That's why we sing. We do all those things as a form of worship, which is, yes, telling God how we feel about God, but it's also telling us how we feel about God so that we remember. And then the other thing that church is for practice. It's where we go intentionally in community to practice being God's people. So
Collect money.
if we do something good with it, share our lives with each other, sit next to somebody that we really don't agree with, break bread with somebody that's not our favorite, work to talk respectfully with a bunch of people that have different personalities and different interests and different viewpoints, extend grace and love and forgive people. It's the messiness of just practice. And then we try to help each other by saying, okay, here's one thing I've learned I'm going to share with you. At least at our church, we do discussion more than we do sermon. And it's a lot of conversation about, here's how I do that, or here's what I'm thinking. And it's kind of a lab. It's a practice area. It's a way for us to say, okay, these are some things that help us. And then, okay, let's try some of those things. Let's try to pray these different ways, or let's try to do these different spiritual practices. So, yeah, worship is about proclaiming to God and to us, to each other, to ourselves. And practice is just to make it real so that we actually have to put our money where our mouth is.
I think Steve knows that I have this personal policy of not saying no when I'm asked to do things, even if it's not my comfort zone. So I'm doing the common table today. So today for common table, we're going to say together a revision of the Apostles' Creed. But before we get into it, I want to read a few things that tease out some themes explored in this liturgy. I don't know if everyone's brain works this way, but I get so much out of something if I can connect it to more than what it is, if I can tease things out and find a strain through multiple disciplines, experiences, and areas of my life and the world around me. So as we delve into this section of the morning, and we speak aloud our common and shared beliefs, I want us to think about themes of sharing and commonality. I am something of a podcast addict, and it's got a wee bit neurotic. The headphones are always here, and yeah, it's just never ending. Finch is actually following suit. He falls asleep to ethics podcasts every night now. So ask him questions later. I've got a few segments from podcasts that I've listened to. The first is from an interview with the writer Zadie Smith. Zadie Smith is English, but she found herself facing the first lockdown when she was staying in New York, and she had this to say about her experience. I don't have COVID, I just got a cough. I think in the US, it exposed the absolute non-existence of the commons in that country. Everything was confronted piecemeal and with money as the final motivation and regulator, even the procuring of ventilators. In Europe, sadly, it revealed that our post-war social contract is hanging by a thread. It took a war to create the conditions that allowed for the creation of a mixed economy social contract in Europe. People who now consider that social contract liberalism or not Marxist enough either do not understand what it was like to be poor in 1920 or 1850 or 1773 in the UK compared to, say, 1968 or 1985. Or else they grew up outside the commons themselves,
private schools, private property, private healthcare, and participate in these debates from a rhetorical angle only. Believe me, the difference was not lost on poor people themselves. Speaking of coming from a normal background, Smith said, "I really object to being lectured by people who had no place in the commons, who went to private schools, telling people who lived and benefited from the commons that it's insufficient, that the pact was nothing, it was just hopeless liberalism. It's in no way perfect, but to dismiss it, and from a position of rhetorical radical thought without any idea of what it is like to live in government housing or go to state schools, to participate in state health care, this drives me up the wall. I want to know not what they say at 20, but when you've got to our age, and I've seen this cycle a few times, not only that they're willing to defund the police and dismantle blatantly racist structures, now I want to know when they're 35 and they're married, if they get married, if the polyamory doesn't work out, that they're not going to move to the suburbs and start this again. I want to know where they're going to send their kids to school. It's much easier to wave a banner. Now it's those choices. Are you going to participate in the commons? Are you going to send your kids to school with our children? Because that's the fundamental question. Are you going to live in our neighbourhoods as equal participants, not as gentrifiers? The commons, that's where justice happens. So, sorry if that's too political for a Sunday morning. We'll turn now to Rob Bell's podcast. That's from the same theme, but a bit more philosophical. Possessing everything. Possessing everything is when you have a largeness of spirit that inhales the goodness of life as you encounter it in all its vast depth and variety. For many people, life is evaluated by surfaces. Ownership and possession raise questions about how you evaluate your life. We live in a system that has indoctrinated millions of people in an external evaluation system of ownership that tends to stay focused on surfaces. What do you have? What do you own? What have you achieved? What's in your garage? Money, all the standard cliches. But the problem with an evaluation of life that is only based on external ownership is it tends to stay focused on surfaces, failing to penetrate the depths of experience. But to possess everything is to have a largeness, a wideness, an expanse of your spirit that inhales and absorbs and affirms and celebrates the goodness of life whenever and wherever and however you encounter it in all its vast depth of diversity and variety. The inhaling part really reminded me of what Ruth was just saying about perfume. So Rob Bell isn't talking about a modern hipster concept there, but drawing from Paul in 2 Corinthians 6. This is a long-winded list, but I'm going to do it. We put no stumbling block in anyone's path, so that our ministry will not be discredited. Rather, as servants of God, we commend ourselves in every way, in great endurance, in troubles, hardships, and distress, in beatings, imprisonments, and riots, in hard work, sleepless nights, and hunger, in purity, understanding, patience, and kindness, in the Holy Spirit, and in sincere love, in truthful speech, and in the power of God, with weapons of righteousness in the right hand and left, through glory and dishonor, bad report and good report, genuine, yet regarded as impostors, known, yet regarded as unknown, dying, and yet we live on, beaten, and yet not killed, sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, poor, yet making many rich, having nothing, and yet possessing everything. We have spoken freely to you, Corinthians, and opened wide our hearts to you. We are not withholding our affection from you, but you are withholding yours from us. As a fair exchange, I speak as to my children, open wide your hearts also. So, as we approach this liturgy, I invite you to open wide your hearts, to possess everything as with a large and wide spirit, to participate in the common table as we participate in the world together, and to notice the themes of commonality here in words like everyone, all, common, and sharing. Okay, join me. I awaken trustfully to God, all embracing love, ever present yet incomprehensible, from whom, through whom, and in whom all things are. I awaken trustfully to the one light enlightening everyone, personally embodied in following Jesus as the Christ, whose full humanity originates with the very life of God. He was executed by the powers that be, sharing death and rejection faced by us all. But neither death nor rejection could end or contain the common life Jesus began. The self-giving life is again one with God's life. Much more is to come beyond this story. Yet again and again, all past and present lives are weighed and renewed in the self-giving common life. I awaken trustfully to the moving of God's Spirit, the holiness of sharing God's common life with all, God's unconditional embrace, and the receiving of every moment into the boundless life of God.
The lecture reading is from Psalm 19 today. The heavens are telling the glory of God. The firmament proclaims his handiwork. Well, that's 91. See how good my adaptive skills are and reflect on that.
You pick it back, I thought you should remember.
Oh yeah, sorry.
In the beginning, etc.
Amen. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In the heavens he has set the tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom from his wedding canopy, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and nothing is hid from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing in the heart. The commandment of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey, the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned, in keeping them there is great reward. But who can detect their errors? Clear me from hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from the insolent. Do not let them have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless, and the innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So, when I reflected upon this, I think I almost noticed a fear coming from the psalmist that has very much been present with me as well. What words are acceptable? Oh, I don't want to be this, I don't want to be that. They're very terrified of not being something, and all their requests, I think, is actually quite fear-based or guilt-based, and they're quite scared. And I think theology is about asking better questions, not just about coming up with good answers. And so whenever we look to other words that are in this passage, not just the word of the servant, but we look to the words of the stars, and I don't know about you, but the words I find coming from the stars are definitely beautiful words. And so for me, I find the better question to ask at the end of all this is not that making sure that my words are acceptable, because that connotates, that you can be rejected then, and what words are in and out, because we're all in and we're all accepted already. And so the question I would like to ask is, how can our words be beautiful? because to me, when I look at the stars, I don't go to look at the stars because I'm worried, oh, I better look at the stars or else this bad thing will happen or I'll be a terrible person. I just look at the stars because they're beautiful in themselves and I'm naturally drawn to it. And I hope that's the framework we can maybe adopt when we're reflecting upon what words we're using, that we use beautiful words, not because we're terrified of being ugly. We don't use lovely words because we're terrified of not being accepted, but we use lovely words because that's good enough in and of itself, because it brings us life to give life to others through our words. And so part of me wants to really advocate, let your words be beautiful, but I realize they could also come across as like, you better do this thing, and that's not what I want to do. And so my recommendation this week is to just go out and listen to what the stars are saying to you, to go watch some nature documentary or have a nice bath, so that what you pour into your heart will be beautiful, so that your meditations of your heart may be more beautiful, and then hopefully the words that you say are more beautiful. But don't do all that because you have to, or you ought to, or you're scared of what will be if you don't. Just do it because it's beautiful, and that's enough. And we have the prayers of the people now.
God of friendship, I come to know you the love and care through the embodied presence of others.
God of friendship,
I come to know you love and care through the embodied presence of others.
Weave me together with kindred spirits. Knit me more closely with friends of the soul. Cultivate in me a kinship with humanity, so that I recognize my struggles and joys in others. Weave me together with kindred spirits. Knit me more closely with friends of the soul. Cultivate in me a kinship with humanity, so that I recognize my struggles and joys in others.
In my loneliness, reveal to me this communion, and may I be a solace to others who ache for connection. Transform me through conversation and loving presence. In my loneliness, reveal to me I may be a solace to others who ache for connection. Transform me through conversation and loving presence. Help me to see how I am part of a great circle of pilgrims, witnesses, ancestors, and mystics who guide me to true connection with you. Gather me into your great wide heart, so that I might discover I am never separate, but always held in love.
See how I am part of a great circle of pilgrims, witnesses, ancestors, and mystics, guide me to true connection with you. Gather me into your great wide heart, so I may discover I am never separate, but always held in love.
God of friendship, I come to know your love and care through the embodied presence of others. Weave me together with kindred spirits. Knit me more closely with friends of the soul. Cultivate in me a kinship with humanity, so that I recognize my struggles and joys in others. In my loneliness, reveal to me this communion, and may I be a solace to others who ache for connection. Transform me through conversation and loving presence. Help me to see how I am part of a great circle of pilgrims, witnesses, ancestors, and mystics who guide me to true connection with you. Gather me into your great wide heart, so I might discover I am never separate, but always held in love.
So good morning, everyone. It does my heart a lot of good when I see those hangy things disappear, bits of paper, because I know that people are going to engage and share. Giraffe Club is on right now, as we've seen some of the kids are heading out. If any of the young ones want to go and be giraffes for the morning, head on out. That's the way to go. So we're in this series at the moment called Keeping Faith Through Ordinary Time. We're in a season what's called Ordinary Time in the Church, which just means it's not really a feast time or there's no significant celebration going on in the church calendar. It's ordinary. The landscape is flat. And that flat landscape invites us to explore areas we might not otherwise explore. Well, at least it does to me. Because we are a curious people. Last week we focused on the Bible. What does it mean to keep faith with the Bible? This is a Bible right in the center, this blue book. It is all these other books that are on this table put together. So we know in our heads that the Bible is a library. In fact, I think we should use the phrase biblical library rather than the Bible, because it reminds us that there are a multiplicity of voices and words that are put into this single volume. And by putting it into a single volume, that somehow implies that there's meant to be a consensus, makes us think that they all agree with each other. Whereas if we remember there's a library of different texts, that reminds us that actually sometimes these words do harmonize with each other. Other times they are in contrariness. They are almost combative with each other. And through that wrestling and harmonizing and changing and arguing and differing with each other, we discover the Word of God in a quite unique way. So it's a wonderful collection of texts. But so many of us over time can easily lose faith with it. What does this ancient book have to say to me today? What about this horrible text here? I don't know what that means, and it's easy just to chuck it, forgetting that actually there's an invitation there to go deeper. This week we are focusing on the church. What does it mean to keep faith with the church? I'm doing church and Bible first because the two kind of go together. One of the reasons that there's so many different versions of the Bible is that there are different versions of church. And at different points in history, different councils have been held to decide which books go in, which go out. And a lot of that has just been reflective of the church at that time. Okay? And also, I think the church is one of the areas where people tend to lose faith as well. I think those two areas, Bible and church, tend to be where a lot of people of faith can just have enough. The church can hurt them, the Bible can confuse them, and they just check out. They don't know how to hold on to faith when there is a singular text, or so it's presented, a singular church, all these two main points of authority, church and Bible. And what happens when you're at odds with those authorities? What happens when you struggle with the Bible and it's meant to be your authority? What happens when you struggle with the church and it's meant to be your authority? So of course, the church is complicated and almost as complex, maybe more complex, than all these scriptural texts that are put together in the Bible. And before we take a closer look at that, we're going to have a word from our sponsor, Rachel Held Evans.
So a lot of people are talking about sort of the death of the church, like it's this big horrible thing that we're on the precipice of doom. There's a megachurch pastor who even did this sort of stunt where he drove up to his church on a hearse and then gave a sermon about how will Christianity have a funeral or a resurrection, and it was just, we have this posture in a lot of Christianity that we see the numbers changing, at least in North America, and shifting, the demographics shifting, and people kind of freak out and say, well, the church is dying, and unless we do all of this change, then it's gonna die. And I can't help but think to myself, maybe a little death and resurrection is exactly what the church needs right now. Maybe this means that for Christians in North America, we're learning that Christianity isn't about empire. Maybe our empire building days are over, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the church isn't about power and money and numbers. Maybe being the church is about something else. And maybe dying to those old ways of doing things is exactly what needs to happen. So in thinking about death and the death of the church, I'm not afraid of the church dying. Death is something that empires worry about. It's not something gardeners worry about. It's not something resurrection people worry about. So if the church in North America needs to die to some of its old ways, then let it die. Maybe this is just God creating something new. That's what I'm optimistic about. So when I'm thinking about death, I'm thinking about resurrection.
So inasmuch as these texts here have been difficult and confusing for lots of people, and the church has been difficult and off-putting for a lot of people, so the church has also over time been wonderful and a source of great help and inspiration to lots of people. And these texts have been a source of help and inspiration to lots of people as well. I think the problem we have with both church and Bible comes from this idea of authority. It's actually exactly what Matthew was talking about in his reflection on the psalm. He noted that it's not about the right words or having the correct form of practice with the church, so much as finding inspiration and beauty. As the great Callistus Ware says, God is not the object of our knowledge, but the cause of our wonder. And Matthew is reminding us that being people who are caused to wonder is the point. We were never supposed to have a neck-up faith. Like, we know the right stuff. We are in the right church. We have the correct Bible version. Therefore, we're safe. A lot of people do want that, I find. A lot of people want security. And those sorts of people will tend to think of the Bible, as a friend of mine once described to me, as the instruction manual for the Christian faith. Right? Here's the thing about instruction manuals. Anyone have a instruction manual for their car, like a car manual? You all got one, yeah? Where is it? Where's your car manual right now? Glove box, anybody? Bookshelf? Anybody read it? That's the thing with instruction manuals. They go in glove boxes, they go in shelves. They're there. When do you read it, by the way? How to change the clock. The instruction manual comes out. What else, Rosie? When something goes wrong. How often do we treat the Bible exactly the same way? Goes on a dusty shelf somewhere, don't read it, except when we want to prove something. We want to know the tire pressure, and what does it say, and all of a sudden it becomes like, not a weapon, that's putting it too strongly, but it does become something we want to give us certainty. We want it to be an authority, but it was never intended to do that. Instruction manuals don't tend to produce curiosity and wonder or a sense of search for beauty, do they? That's not how they work. These texts do if you use them well, and the church can as well if interacted with well. You saw a chart last week of the development of the Bible, and we noted how it tended to just have all these branches over time. This is a chart of the development of the church. Don't worry that you can't read the individual labels, they're too small. But basically from left to right, it starts with the early church in Acts, with Pauline Christianity, you might call it. And it is spreading out over time. All the branches are getting closer to our time, or just branching out more and more. Do you notice how the church and all the different versions of it, from the Roman Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, the Protestant Church, which began around the 1500s, and then all the denominations of Baptists and Methodists and Anglicans, you see how that's all, as time goes on, it's becoming more and more diverse. Not unlike the scriptures. There's a diverseness here, there's a multiplicity here. In the church, there's a diverseness, there's a multiplicity there. Is it possible that these words and churches and expressions of faith were never intended to give you or I the final word, or to be the final word on the matter, but an invitation to explore all these notes and rhythms and patterns and beats and find a way of moving and dancing within our own faith, listening to the music that's gone before, taking inspiration from it where we find inspiration, seeing warning where we find warning, taking heed where we need to take heed, but not setting it over us as a way to cow us into submission, and never using it that way against others. Could it be we would have a more wholesome way of keeping faith with each other if we were a people who genuinely wanted wonder and curiosity and beauty over being right? There's something about words and people who say words and creeds and books and everything else that is written and said and proclaimed that, if treated well, isn't necessarily meant to finalize everything and provide singularity. If God wanted us to have a specific volume, a text that was our instruction manual, God could have provided us with one. I would have sent it floating down from heaven on this massive beam of light and had it hover. It would have been huge. And the audio version would have been narrated by Brian Blessed, because that's just the kind of gravitas you need in something of this nature. Lazarus is alive. With Gordon. Anyway, God could have done that if that's what we were meant to have. The same with the church. If we were meant to have a singular church authority, that church could be levitating and be glorious and hover above a mountaintop somewhere. And if that's what we were meant to have, we would have been given it, or God could have provided it for us. But what we have instead is multiplicity, diversity. Maybe that's a good thing and not a bad thing, or at least can be. Sometimes it's not about looking at the words, even when they contradict or harmonize with each other, but looking at the spaces between. That's what poems do. Here's an ancient poem, which was only discovered about 60 or 70 years ago. It's called The Thunder, Perfect Mind, or at least this is an extract from it. It was found in an old Gnostic community, and only discovered it yesterday when Nick read me a portion of it, which was in one of the books she was reading. Anyway, just listen to these words, and see if you can remember some of the words from the text that Ali read from 2 Corinthians 3. So this is from The Thunder, Perfect Mind. 2 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians? 2 Corinthians 6, that's what it was, starting at verse 3. There could have been 6 letters to the Corinthian church. I was sent forth from the power, and I have come to those who reflect upon me, and I have been found among those who seek after me. Do not be ignorant of me, for I am the first and the last. I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the mother and the daughter. I am the barren one, and many are her sons. I am the silence that is incomprehensible, and the idea whose remembrance is frequent. I am the voice whose sound is manifold, and the word whose appearance is multiple. I am the utterance of my name. I am godless, and I am the one whose God is great. I am the one whom you have reflected upon, and you have scorned me. I am unlearned, and they learn from me. I am the one that you have despised, and you reflect upon me. I am the one whom you have hidden from, and you appear to me. You know me, be ignorant of me. For I am knowledge and ignorance. I am shame and boldness. I am strength and I am fear. I am war and peace. Give heed to me. You missed the first part there. He goes, what does that even mean? Is that the laptop that's buzzing? Yeah, you can just turn the volume down, and I'm not going to need it again. Something about words like that, you don't listen to them and go, I know exactly what that means, do you? But what you do feel is something that provokes you to want to understand what's going on. It's a set of words where contradictory ideas are just banged together, because those are the only words we have, and then you're invited to find your place in between. And Paul does exactly the same in the passage that Ali read to us. Listen, through glory and dishonor, bad report and good report, genuine, yet regarded as impostors, known, yet regarded as unknown, dying, and yet we live on, beaten, and yet not killed, sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, poor, yet making many rich, having nothing, and yet possessing everything. You see the contradictory ideas and the patterns. And it's not about reading that and going, I know exactly what that means, and I'm going to apply it. It's about reading that and going, where do I find beauty inspired by that kind of language? The old Gnostic text was written a few hundred years before Paul wrote his. So maybe that's just the way that they used to think in that space and time. Tim, you here? Tim, you are here? Not that Tim, different Tim. Tim, do you remember you did a Facebook post yesterday? Did you go for a hike? Cave Hill? You remember the quote that you put on it? It was something about, I'll give you the first part, if we were meant to stay in one place. Okay, did you hear that? I love that quote. I haven't read it before. And he said if you were meant to stay in one place, we would have roots instead of feet. We aren't, as people made in the image of God, people of roots. We are people of feet. Maybe that's why Jesus said, follow rather than stay. Rather than, here's your authority and here's your text, stay there, Jesus says, keep going. And it's no wonder as we've kept going, as these people kept going, they kept writing and multiple versions of what faith looks like kept on branching off and off. And this can be something that's disillusioning or worrying or upsetting or confusing, or it could be an invitation to wander, into curiosity, to growth in our own faith. As we come to a close, I just want to read something from 1 Corinthians 3 to 9. That's where I got the Corinthians 3 from. This whole thing about the church being multiple versions and multiple people involved didn't start like at the Reformation or the Great Schism, East and West. It was happening already in the early church. For you are still of the flesh. For as long as there is jealousy and quarreling among you, you are not of the flesh. Sorry, are you not of the flesh, my eyes, and behaving according to human inclinations? You see there, the part that's of the flesh isn't the multiplicity, it's the jealousy and the quarreling between them. That's the bit Paul criticizes. Not the existence of multiple types and expressions of faith and of personalities involved, but of the I'm better than you part of it. For when one says, I belong to Paul, and yet another, I belong to Apollos, who were different leaders in the church, are you not merely human? What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. The one who plants and the one who waters have a common purpose, and each will receive wages according to the labor of each. For we are God's servants. We are God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. You are the church. I know you've heard it many times, but this is what has always been said from the beginning. You are God's field and God's building. And yes, that field and that building is branching out in multiple ways and has multiple expressions. And that's okay, as long as you don't go down the route of quarreling and jealousy, and I'm better than. Remembering that God is the one who inspires us all. So there is the unity. The unity is in love for each other and love for God, as it always was. This is the bit that Ali ended with, the last words of the passage that we read. Open wide your hearts also. That's what you have to do. When you see all these texts and all those churches, and you meet different people who express their faith in different ways, open wide your hearts. Because ultimately, though there are multiple texts and churches, there's only one of you. You actually are the person whose experience of reading these texts, of listening to them, of being in faith communities, that's your own unique experience. Open your heart to receive it all and to find inspiration, encouragement, warning, etc., where you are. Because also, as we read last week, ultimately, as Paul says, God's word isn't written just there, but on your hearts, and your own conscience will tell you what is good and what isn't. Because, guess what? You are the servants of God. You are God's building. So, take courage in what it means for you to keep faith, to hold on to faith. If the church turns you off sometimes because of some of the crazy stuff that goes on, I get it. But maybe there's actually also an invitation in the diversity to find, or at least to look for, beauty, as Matthew said, to open our hearts, as Ali pointed out, and for ourselves to listen to what God is saying to us individually, through our conscience, as we wrestle with the Bible and with the church. Having authority, this is what's right and this is what's wrong, church and Bible, is fine and well and good as far as it goes. But so much better than that is having curiosity and desire for beauty, wonder, growth. I think that's how we keep faith, in a way that's expansive and open and relaxed and not brittle and paranoid and quarrelsome. May we be a people who are open to that kind of faith. Let's all stand together, and I'm going to invite the musicians, John and Roy, if you'd like to come forward. And we're just going to sing our closing song, and then we'll finish with a blessing after that.
The sun will rise, the sun will rise, bringing light to the earth as it springs from the ground. The sun will rise, the sun will rise. Won't you dry all your tears and lay your burdens down? Won't you dry all your tears and lay your burdens down? The sun will rise, the sun will rise, bringing life to the earth as it springs from the ground. The sun will rise, the sun will rise. Won't you dry all your tears and lay your burdens
to take a seat, please. So we're going to, we're going to bless each other in a moment. I just wanted to have one little thought as we come to end. Just a practical point. Steve's asked me to remind you that if you want to contribute financially, there is a QR code there, and there's also a box over there on the wall. Follow the red line down to the fire alarm, and you'll be able to pay into there if you want. So, thank you if you're willing to do that. I'm going to play a piece of music. I think it was maybe Wednesday. Sarah was making dinner, and I was standing in the corner of the kitchen, and this piece of music came on. And well, I'll tell you why I'm going to tell you about it in a moment. But just listen to them. It's a piece of music called the Ashokan Farewell. You may know it. I'm just playing from the phone here through the microphone. Hopefully, we'll get enough volume that we'll be okay. But it's certainly worth listening to the whole thing. But something happened to me while I was standing there. I think for most of us, we're often maybe our whole spiritual journey is a whole process of trying to seek God. And all I can describe it is that it was a kind of transcendental moment. Okay, it probably lasted about 20 seconds. That's all. As I listened to this, just standing in the corner of the kitchen, I didn't seek it. I didn't look for it. And maybe you have this experience too, or have had it. It's probably, for me, it's probably the most profound experience I've had, a spiritual experience, although having been a follower of Jesus for a very long time. And what the experience was, and the words this morning have been wonderful as far as I'm concerned, so many beautiful words. But words are, to me, they take us to a kind of wordless place ultimately. That they stimulate us to see the world in a different way. And as I listened to this music on that particular day, I kind of felt, again, it's wordlessness if you want, but that there is no judgment. Okay, I don't have to judge myself. I don't have to evaluate myself, that I am entirely accepted. But also in that moment, the insight that all of us are accepted. That all of us, this experience is for all of us. That God wants all of us, has given himself fully for all of us. And so I just want to encourage you this week, in light of all the words that have been said, to go out and say those beautiful words. To recognize that in you there is a deposit, that you are made in the image of God, and that he intends to use you. And whether you succeed or fail in that, you're not going to be judged. You're still going to be loved. So I'm going to ask you all to stand and speak these words of blessing to each other as we go from this place today. And if you'd like to, just look around and speak to others these words. You are God's servant.
You are God's servant, gifted with dreams and visions,
Upon you rests the grace of God like flames of fire. Love and serve the Lord in the strength of the Spirit. May the deep peace of Christ be with you, the strong arms of God sustain you, and the power of the Holy Spirit strengthen you in every way. May you go in peace to love and to serve the Lord.
This is my deliverance, hands held high, as you deliver it. Oh, you have made me a child of God, my feet on the ground, my heart in heaven. I am great, made without the living. Oh, you have made me a child of God. Well, I lay in the sand with sweet forgiveness in my hand. Oh, as a gift from you. Your water floods my brain. This gray cranium won't be the same. Oh, where I've been won't do. This is my deliverance, hands held high, as you deliver it. Oh, you have made me a child of God, my feet on the ground, my heart in heaven. I am great, made without the living. Oh, you have made me a child of God. Whoa, you have made me a child of God. Whoa, you have made me a child of God. I won't go till I know you have soul you have in me. This is my deliverance, hands held high, as you deliver it. Oh, you have made me a child of God, my feet on the ground, my heart in heaven. I am bread made without the living. Oh, you have made me a child of God. You have made me a child of God. You have made me a child of God. You have made me a child of God.
Time to let it go, it won't let go of me. Hanging by a thread, cutting the cord and then falling back into the black. Cause if I don't, if I wait till it feels right, I'll be waiting my whole life. Closing my eyes, remember how we were like gold when you see me high. If you need me, babe, that's the way it was. That's the history blue, how we used to roar like an open fire. That's the way it visiting me at night, climbing in my bed. You were so quiet that you never woke me. I love the way you could see the good in everything. But do we feel the fire? Closing my eyes, remember how we were like gold when you see me high. If you need me, babe, that's the way it was. That's the history blue, how we used to roar like an open fire. That's the way it was, but that's history. Started with a word, now look at where we are. Everything we've done is there on our faces for anyone willing to read between the lines. Now look at where we are. Everything we've done is there on our faces for anyone willing to. That's the way it was, but that's history. That's the way it was, but that's history.